It's being.
Thank you. Yeah, grand. So the second poem I wrote in this kind of in-between period where I was not yet living here, but I went on this travel bursary tour of the UK with a bunch of South African students, and we were all from different universities. We all had very different backgrounds. It was very illuminating, but it was the year before the Brexit vote, and it was just a strange time, I think, politically for South Africa and for the UK. So this poem is about realizing one's identity in those conversations that I was having, and also thinking about other people's kind of identities in that group. And it's for my friend Faith. It's called Even Birds. We arrive in Cambridge after a long night's flight, 18, 20-somethings with a hangover of Africa. What really matters, the man says, is everyone's comfort. We wouldn't want anyone to be out of place. Don't ask and don't confess potential transgressions. This is a tour, after all. So I keep clear of the line, sick, tight with my truth. Faith is still too, but later that night she knocks on my door and cries for skin she's never been in. These queer constructs, towers cut on ancestors' backs. We discuss spectrums of shame. Late dawn is lilac phosphorescence crossed with migrating shadows. There's no snow, just white ash. Surely the others see, they must sense our bent. Even birds know silence is also an answer. It's great to read that poem here because I'm sure some people will know that's from the Afrikaans proverb, stilte is ook 'n antwoord. If I say that here, I think I get a lot of blank stares. So good to read it here. Yeah, so a lot of the poems I'm going to read are going to be the more South African leaning ones in the collection, but I also have a few animal-y poems. When people ask what I write about, I say animals, vegetables, and minerals, and other things, which really doesn't narrow it down, but it is often the most accurate thing. So this is a poem I wrote during the first lockdown, when I was watching a lot of YouTube videos. I think we all were. And this was a video I stumbled upon of a rabbit being surrounded by fruit. There were a whole series of these videos, and what would happen is the owner of the rabbit would surround it while it was sleeping with whatever fruit they decided that day. This one is about grapes. And it looked like there would be a kind of amniotic sac around the rabbit. And then in the very last frame, maybe after 40 minutes of doing this, you would see a hand with a knife and you think, oh my God, they're going to kill the rabbit. But they would just slice open whatever fruit was there, and the rabbit would smell it while dreaming. And even though it was still asleep, it would start eating the fruit. I loved it. I was also very bored, as I'm sure we all were. So this is the poem that came out of that, waking a sleeping rabbit by surrounding him with grapes. In this frame, I am the fruits of tight skin lined artfully round your twitching, the still in still life, as buck legs stretch to pulse and jump in dreams. You honk and squeak through imagined banana bites, parsley roots, and dillweed. You've yet to smell red, dripping, sweet. As an eyelid peels its lens, we are frozen in symbiosis. You lying side-like looking shut, me a membrane, doubled womb. And it's unclear who's the sacrifice. God is the hand that splits me even now, as your teeth range free from sleeping to waking, free for so long from decaying till time coils and I am once more a vine, vining round a rabbit-shaped negative space, waiting for the thumbnail's knife to slice me open, please. The next two poems that I'm going to read were recently published in the Oxonian Review. And I'm quite pleased because these are a few that didn't find a home before being published in Thin Slices. And both of them have something or other to do with the work I've done on Southern African literature. I was reading a lot about figs because they come up a lot in Zoe Wickham's You Can't Get Lost in Cape Town. And I started thinking about figs and how weird they really are. I think the strangest fruit. So this is about me trying to come to terms with figs and trying to eat them, but failing. It's called a fig. Forbidden starts with a fig tree. This is how the Bible begins, and also my belief, though mine stems not from the leaves, but eating. Uterine pulp, endometrial seeds, these are made in part from the bodies of pollinators, wingless wasps. Thank Aristotle for this naked knowledge. Some thirsts are forever trapped beneath the skin. Fresh air, sleep, the mortal caterwauling of curiosity, but hunger dies with an insect digested through plant flesh. It's easy not to eat like a lady with this death's milk in mind. Other roots of disgust include flushing through a first menses, feeling heavy and cystic and thick, and Pentecostal sex education. If only the milk of human kindness alone could feed a body that bruises for being, for seeing, for knowing too much. Oh, fruit that consumes, slimy Ouroboros, the rats eat you, for they cannot read. I push away plates and like to think I'm wiser. So while I was reading and thinking about figs, I was also thinking about Olive Schreiner and thinking back to, during my undergraduate degree, 2 trips up Buffelskorp in the Eastern Cape. It was a great pilgrimage. We would, our honors class went up and, looked at the sarcophagus where she's buried with her husband and their 1-day-old baby and their dog. And I loved that assemblage. I loved the whole thing. I loved being there. And it was just such a beautiful, stark place. So this took a long time to come, but it's called Striking Rots. And it's there's a kind of epigraph, which is a quote from the Freedom Song for the 1956 Women's March against apartheid passed laws. It's, when you strike the women, you strike a rock, you will be crushed. Ingrid and Virginia were taken with the waves, but you, Olive, dreamed of being exhumed in the foggy Kamdaboo. Some mark the sky when ascending, harking black eagles over sarcophagus, but the truth is you loved that solid, stolid earth. Husband, dog, human bundle, all took 10 men to move, yet your will was mineral. The locusts of 86 led preachers to curse the mountain for its thunderstorms, the eternal aversion of flora. With buffaloes, they died. The peak persists. Olive, you embraced women as rocks. Still, the words are live, triggering lightning strikes. I believe I'm allowed to read other poets' poems within reason. So I'm going to read you one. It's a bit long and everyone will know it, but I'd like to read it because the next poem is written in response to it. So it is Gentling a Wildcat by Douglas Livingstone. Not much wildlife, roared mine leonine host from the fringe of a forest of crackles round an old dome-headed steam radio between hotel and river, a mile of bush, except for the wildcats and jackals. And he, of these parts for years, was right. That evening I ventured with no trepidations and a torch, towed by the faculty I cannot understand that has got me into too many situations. Under a tree in filtered moonlight, a ragged heap of dusty leaves stopped moving. A cat lay there, open from chin to loins, lower viscera missing, truncated tubes and bitten off things protruding. Little blood there was, but a mess of damaged lungs, straining to hold its breath for quiet, claws fixed, curved and jutting, jammed open in a stench of jackal meat. It tried to raise its head, hating the mystery, death. The big spade skull with its lynx fat cheeks, aggressive still, raging eyes hooked in me, game. Nostrils pulling at a tight mask of anger and fear. Then I remembered hearing, they're quite impossible to tame. Closely in a bowl of unmoving roots and untouched carcass, unlicked, swaddled and wrapped in trappings of birth, the first of a litter, stretched. Rooted out in mid-confinement, a time when jackals have courage enough for a wildcat. In some things too, I am a coward, and could not here punch down with braced thumb, lift the nullifying stone or stiff-edged hand to axe with mercy the nape of her spine. Besides, I convinced myself, she was numb. And oppressively, something felt wrong, not her approaching melting with earth, but in lifetimes of claws, kaleidoscopes, moon claws, sun claws, teeth after death, certainly both at mating and birth. So I sat and gentled her with my hand, not moving much, but saying things, using my voice. And she became gentle, affording herself the influent luxury of breathing, untrammeled, bubbly, safe in its noise. Later, calmed, despite her tides of pain, she let me ease her claws, the ends of the battle, pulling off the trapped and rancid flesh. Her miniature limbs of iron relaxed. She died with hardly a rattle. I placed her peaceful, ungrinning corpse and that of her firstborn in the top gallants of a young tree, out of ground reach to grow, restart a cycle of maybe something more pastoral, commencing with beetles, then maggots, then ants. The poem I'm reading in response to this is called Gentled, and it was written for my first pet, a cat called Purdy. Gentled. 11 years after you first graced our lawn with drawn-out yowls and yellowed claws, we have to make the stilted trip. The receptionist asks for your name. Is it still the same? The checkup senses you were never gentled, but today you are lime-eyed and tame. My little lost one, my myth of bone, stripes of the tiger in zebra chrome. What an unusual coat, the woman across says. Her dark kitten stares. I smile despite the diagrams of fleas, warnings of disease, and boxes of organic dog biscuits. A parrot carols its curtain call, and we are next to be shepherded in. Claws discording metal, crawling the table. You are pewter-framed, mute, hot as a crushed bud. There's no defining final moment, no shaking out a last lungful, just the hum of fluorescent tubes. It's okay, take 2 tissues. I stay until your saliva dries. On my way outside with an uncanny cage, the black cat wails. Her human turns away. While we're on the more animally poems, I wanted to read something that I wrote before ChatGPT, but is kind of using similar technology. So there's a Burroughs cut-up technique generator. Well, there are many of them, but there's one online that I particularly liked, and I used to feed poems into them and come up with some great things. And this one in particular was really great because you could switch gender as well as all the other things. You could choose the line length you wanted. And it gave me this poem. So this poem was generated by taking the wording from the back of food labels. So, you know, like organically produced, whatever other things they want to tell us and want us to believe. And increasingly I was reading these while being vegan and thinking, this is all just a game and it doesn't really mean anything. So this is called The Game. The packaging said 100% natural, genuine material, organic ingredients, locally produced. The labels read grass-fed, cage-free, not tested on, funding alternatives. The man says, fresh game, you hue woman beauty. The board said 100% ingredients, genuine produced, organic material, locally natural. The lawyer read grass-free, cage-fed, not alternatives, funding tested on. The woman says, the bones are not so strange as the flesh. So you might have noticed by now that I like to experiment with things in poems, and a lot of that is to do with biology and thinking about animals, vegetables, and minerals. And some of the more recent work I've been doing has been working with scientists. And so writing poems about their work, but also increasingly thinking about how what a scientist does can be applied to poetry and that relationship. I guess it started with Douglas Livingstone, really. And again, I'm grateful to be in an audience where that comment makes sense. So this poem really came about because I wanted to do what scientists do in a lab. I wanted to have the 5 stages of an experiment as we draw it up in school. I wanted to have the question, the hypothesis, the methods, the test, the conclusion. So this is quite a long sequence. I don't have many poems left, but so I hope you bear with me. And it's a 5-part sequence poem called Jealousy Experiment. The idea being that I wanted to take a scientific approach to something very unscientific like jealousy. Color question. Green is not the color of love. Some might see this as cheating, to frame an opener in negative terms. But isn't that how we approach all tones? It's not pink, we say, more purple. So it goes. No, green will never be the color of love. That title is thought to belong to its antithesis, red, right at the other end of the spectrum. Even then, popular belief is wrong. Blue is really where that feeling belongs. Rebecca Solnit knew this, Maggie Nelson too. Mitchell sang it and Marrow even drew it. The warmest color, a color for 2. I am all out of questions about love, but can green ever be without a little blue? Likely hypothesis. I send green hearts to platonic friends. I hide them beneath others' likes and effusive comments. This is safe love. When they don't respond, I know not to grieve. When they post a picture with someone new, I never feel envy. Many languages use the same words for both blue and green. In Xhosa and Zulu, luhlaza is used semi-contextually. People add like the sky or like grass, even when speaking of technology. I think about aquamarine and cyan and liking you more than I should do. I wonder how to transmute affection, a thumbs up minus the likeness of blue. If I could, I would fool us both with a lime heart and mean it too. I would reverse our alchemy, green lions spewing out the sun, and stop writing I and you. If the first person is blue, then if the second person is blue, then the first is verdant. Green test. The year I didn't know you were partnered cracked an age of iron with silicon light. The geology of our conversations open like sliced ammonites. Slick as moss, we omitted I from sentences and email threads. We believed subjectless verbs could still the depths of intimacy. Yet, with each pastel message, something greener was growing. A puff of algae fed by water that's diseased. Denial analysis. The aged question is not about eggs and hens or men and women being friends, but gender-neutral green is transmogrified into some such inquiry at the hands of curious parties like the painters who can never leave Eve or Adam without a leaf. We imagined a better question would be, what does natural even mean? As sediment settled deep in our molar teeth, cavities from scent, the mints of feeling seen. Who else received the gleam of your inorganic sentiments? What is lust but pyrite in the canary cry of day? Yet, for all my magma, some fault lines surely lie within the fearful heart of she who didn't ask. Sloppy as yolk, the corollary follows. When archiving denial, you see your own yellow. Fossil conclusion. Closer than the heavens or sea, mundane as a membrane inside you and me. Between all friends, there's the ghost of green. As the coastline compounds sea creatures and petrified leaves, we lie limestone. A record no stylus can repeat. No more blue pixels, the ticks stay gray, delivered but never seen. That's the problem with fossils. For the longest time, we play believe with what they mean. So I'm just going to read a couple more poems. First is much shorter than what I just read, but it's also got a bit of language play going on. So just finding it, there we go. I don't really think it needs an introduction, this one. It's called Ngiakutanda. In Zulu, there is no difference between like and love, between I want to hold your hand and can I see your ring finger? Between wanting to know where you stand and wanting a one-night stand, between the sheets, between two lives, just one phrase makes it come together. I'm still not sure whether open interpretation makes love easier or just lost in translation. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really lovely to read and to know that all the references are being gotten. So it's really great to speak, and I look forward to attending some more. I'm just going to end with one last poem. A kind of another reflection on being here versus being there and all that means. It's called Swimming Lessons. The boy from Bath asks how warm home can be. My nostrils freeze, the sting of remembered chlorine. And suddenly I'm 5 again and stepping between jacaranda blooms, alert for wiggling bees. And I'm starting to swim against the chlorine. And suddenly it's adequate and my limbs are elastic and I'm tasting the smell of crushed marjoram and I'm holding my nose over diaphanous chlorine. And there are imitation cave paintings chalked against moss and I'm tonguing a lemon against grandmother's advice and I'm trying to breathe against the chlorine. Whatever the question was, he does not repeat. Mark my accent. I'm still learning to breathe. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Wow. I think I didn't know what to expect and I was very pleasantly surprised. I think for me, I don't know if you'd be up to read one of your poems again.
Sure.
But I absolutely fell in love with the poem about your first cat. So if you could read that one again, please. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to. It's, yeah, great. So Gentled, after Douglas Livingstone. 11 years after you first graced our lawn with drawn-out yowls and yellowed claws, we have to make the stilted trip. A receptionist asks for your name. Is it still the same? The checkup senses you were never gentled, but today you are lime-eyed and tame. My little lost one, my myth of bone, stripes of the tiger and zebra chrome. What an unusual coat, the woman across says. Her dark kitten stares. I smile, despite the diagrams of fleas, warnings of disease, and boxes of organic dog biscuits. A parrot carols its curtain call, and we are next to be shepherded in. Claws discording metal, crawling the table, you are pewter framed. mute, hot as a crushed bud. There's no defining final moment, no shaking out a last lungful, just the hum of fluorescent tubes. It's okay. Take 2 tissues. I stay until your saliva dries. On my way outside, with an uncanny cage, the black cat wails. Her human turns away.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think why I love it so much is that, to keep it quite simple, is that I'm a dog mom, and I absolutely am obsessed with my child, and I've tried a few times to write about her and our relationship, and I found that I struggled with that. But hearing the way you expressed not only this kitten, but your relationship and this kitten's place in the world, it was really just, you did your baby justice. So I think you should feel really proud of that.
Thank
So
you so
thank
much.
you. We now move on to the Q&A session of the night. So if you guys have any questions for Caitlin, you can just go ahead and unmute yourselves and ask the questions. I think there's some comments in the chat as well. People are just sending you lots of love and appreciation, Caitlin. Okay, guys, if you have a question, you can go ahead and ask.
Yeah,
You can go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Kirsten. Caitlin, that was fantastic reading. I loved the layeredness of your poems, the playfulness, and very intrigued by the way you bring the scientific world into the world of poetry, and quite rewarding where that sometimes goes, quite philosophical, speculative. So I'm sort of trying to figure out a question, but so far it's an appreciation.
Fine if you don't have one, Thank you though, thank you. Yeah, it is rewarding working, sometimes difficult. Some of the poems, took a long time to get there, because you want to do whatever the scientists are doing justice, but you also want it to be interesting. And I think a lot of science writers struggle with that, right? And poetry, as we all know, is sometimes seen as quite impenetrable, and science is also sometimes seen as quite impenetrable. So I think it's difficult sometimes to get that balance right.
But certainly, wow, there's a lot of balancing that seems to work very well from what I can tell. So, wow, and I loved the waking a sleeping rabbit.
Yeah.
Beautifully erotic as well, the poem.
Thank you. Yeah, that one, that was great. That was great fun, actually. That was commissioned for Ilkley Literature Festival in Yorkshire, and we actually got to do, the owners of the video very kindly let me take that video and then transpose a reading of the poem over it. So that was lovely to have that then at the festival. Yeah, it was great fun, that one.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you.
Caitlin, I wanted to ask, we can purchase your collection, and because I won't be able to purchase it right now, as I'm in the Eastern Cape, if you have, a website where we can read your work and engage with it.
Yeah, sure. I'll put it in the chat. So I've got a personal website. And there should be links there to my my book.
Awesome. Thank you. Jacques, you can go ahead.
Sorry?
No, Jacques?
Yeah.
I want to check, can you still hear me there?
Yeah.
Okay. That was a lovely reading. Thank you. That was lovely to listen to you. I was very interested in all the ways of sort of belonging and not belonging that you explored. And I'm thinking of that opening poem you wrote about, you know, around the time of Brexit. You said breakfast. The different ways of fitting in and not belonging to a community. And I wonder, are there poets that you love that speak to that kind of experience, that kind of in-between experience, maybe between countries, but also between poetry and science? I suppose Douglas Livingstone might be an example. He was
definitely Livingstone comes in. This is a great question, by the way. Thank you, Jacques.
Oh, thank you.
Really good question. Yeah, I mean, the kind of belonging, not belonging thing has been a big thing, obviously. Kind of the poetry scene here is very different to back home, I think. And you really get the spoken sense, the spoken word elements in South African poetry. Whereas sometimes I feel like the page is privileged here. So that's interesting. But yeah, also in terms of thinking about just cultural identity. The most recent book I read that really resonated was Mary Jean Chan's Flesh. You know, just beautifully interwoven, thinking about being Chinese British, having lived in America, so that kind of displacement that I relate to, but then also thinking about her gender expression, thinking about, I suppose generationally, there were also mutual interests there. So I find her work really powerful. But yeah, in terms of the South African tradition, I was like the Fig poem takes a line from James Coetzee's translation of the Expedition to the Baobab Tree by Wilma Stockenstrom. And there's kind of thinking about that archive, that legacy of writing and how to write to that. Yeah, Zoe Wickham has been a huge influence as well, thinking about her relocation and kind of wanting to write South Africa and never really getting that out of her work.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful.
Thank you. So it looks like there's a question in the chat about my interest in Zulu and Xhosa. Very simply, I was raised in KwaZulu-Natal and I went to university in the Eastern Cape. So those are the languages I'm most well acquainted with, other than Afrikaans. But I like that kind of the linguistic indeterminacy that is kind of highlighted in those two poems. I think that's really interesting. I also just wanted to focus on those because I think very little is known about them outside of South Africa, and people don't realize that enough. So I wanted to, it's also just fun to do the click and then people are like, huh? Yeah, you know, like it's kind of like, okay guys, catch up. So that's really it. It's not too deep, I'm afraid, but thank you, Jade.
Are there any other questions from anyone? Okay, then I think what we usually do is we take a 5-minute break and then we come back and we have the open mic session. So everybody bring your poems. Thanks guys, see you in 5 minutes.